USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, February 12th, 2024. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. I'm Ed Trefzger with Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Well, what a weekend, guys. And the team that really stands out to me and stands out to all of us probably is Michigan State. But Minnesota also had a great weekend in the Big Ten. Michigan State sweeps Michigan on the weekend. They won the duel in the D in front of over 18,000 fans. It's now the first 20-win season for Michigan State since 07-08.
Well, as somebody who grew up, I moved to Detroit when I was 15 to play hockey, and I used to go to the Great Lakes tournament and the CCHA, and then obviously played in the CCHA in front of big crowds. How exciting is that to see hockey back in a big way in Detroit? I can remember when I was on the committee, we were struggling to sell tickets in Detroit. There was probably only at the time when it was canceled, 14,000 seats sold. So what a big thing for hockey in Detroit to have that big kind of crowd. Michigan State's back there at the top of their game. And then to have Michigan, who's, and I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, kind of on the bubble of the tournament. But what a great atmosphere, and to see that back in Detroit, and what a beautiful building the new Little Caesars Arena is too. So it's a great weekend of hockey, or great game of hockey, the battle for Detroit, and then the game was not a disappointment.
Yeah, that was probably what I was going to say, is that game turned out to be a heck of a hockey game. A 3-1 game late. Michigan grabbed within a goal and had opportunities to tie the game. And you could just see, I'm kind of following Michigan State mostly by social media. And you can see the excitement that this team has right now. There's something special going on there. Great goaltending. They're getting goals, timely goals. We didn't even mention the first game in that series, the Friday night game, a 5-1 win for Michigan State. So they're just playing well right now. 20 wins. You have to go back to the old Rick Comley era. Great coach, great guy. The last time this program put up 20 wins, and I see good things for them. We'll get into where they're positioned in the PairWise shortly, but they're really, really on the upswing, as much as maybe, I know we've talked a lot about Wisconsin. We've talked a lot about Maine this year as kind of the surprise programs. We can't leave out Michigan State, because despite the fact that we might have had higher expectations than usual, we've had higher expectations for a lot of teams that don't end up following through. And this Michigan State team is right there right now.
Well, then Minnesota, we mentioned them, back-to-back shutouts, 3-0 wins. Justin Close, 13 shutouts now in his career. He ties the program record, and this is not over 4 years. Remember, he came in rather suddenly in the middle of the season. Minnesota was wondering what was going to happen, and he's turned out to be terrific.
What another great weekend of hockey. You keep seeing tweets with the attendance, and to have over 21,000 people in the two games, and I think they set the all-time record for attendance or a regular season game at Mariucci there. Like I said, you can't keep going on and on about the attendance that people are having in college hockey. And I got a chance to see Justin Close up close and personal right after the new year. And what a good goaltender he is. He makes things look easy. And obviously, of all the great teams they've had and the great goalies they've had, and only been there for a year and a half or 2.5 years, I guess, to reach that shutout record is a big feat.
And I had to look up, it wasn't like he was stopping 18 and 20 shots a night. I think he had 66 saves on the weekend, which is no surprise when you're playing Penn State.
That's low. That's low for them.
Yeah, actually, maybe it is.
That's one game usually for them.
But, I look at his numbers. This is the second time this season he's had back-to-back shutouts. Third time in his career. So you're talking about 6 of those 13 shutouts come out of just 3 weekends. When he gets in the zone, I think Close is probably one of the best goaltenders in the country. and you're now seeing him prove it with numbers, and it's he's carrying his team on his back. 3 goals in each game, not bad, but it's not a ton of scoring. It's not like Penn State has to put out. I'm sorry, it's not like Minnesota has to put out 5-6 goals a game. Right now they can win with 2 and 1, and they win with 3, but both back-to-back nights here. But I love the way that this Minnesota team is starting to round into form as we head to the home stretch.
May have been Bob Motzko's what I think were his 300th win or whatever, but at least they didn't shut out the Colonials this year. I could say that for certain.
Well, let's turn to Hockey East. UMass, we had kind of wondered about them earlier on this season. They moved into the PairWise bubble when you did your bracketology, Jim, causing a bit of a quandary about what was going to happen with them hosting in Springfield, Massachusetts. But they've gone 4 out of 5 and 5 out of 7 in Hockey East. 4th place in the league, although still very uneven number of games played. And 10th in the PairWise, which would make them a number 3 seed. And that gets rid of a problem. You could put BC or BU in there and not have a first round matchup. How about UMass? Is this a surprise, or is this getting back to where they should have been?
Well, you know what? I think that if they had any stumbles this season, it was when their goaltender, Michael Arabel, was playing at World Juniors for Team Czechia. And they had a couple of missteps in that time. And when he got back, they started to get better, and now they've really rounded into form. I keep using that term. But they're playing really good hockey. Again, they only needed a few goals this weekend. He only gave up 1 in 2 games, Arabel. So I feel like this team is moving in the right direction. I hope that they stay where they do in the PairWise, because it might make things a little bit easier. If you read bracketology last week, there were 3 Hockey East teams that were number 1 seeds, BC, BU, and Maine, but you had UMass as the host in Springfield. And I basically said if the committee had to make a decision, they would have had, for the first time in my memory, or in quite some time, I think there was a number once years ago that they had to do with when the WCHA had half of their league in the tournament, but that they would have had to have a first round interconference matchup. And I had it as BU playing UMass out in Springfield. That's all changed now. Once you get UMass into the number 3 seed, it makes things a little easier. But listen, we see how quickly you can move up. One bad weekend, they could be right back in that precarious predicament and needing to figure out where to put teams that shouldn't be playing in the first round. But I think this was a great weekend of hockey for UMass, and like you said too, the other thing is they've got it's pretty close around them. Teams that are in 3rd, 5th, 6th in Hockey East, even 2nd and 1st, they have games in hand on every one of those teams.
Yeah, you know what? It's good that we're not seeing a as of now a Providence situation where the Providence gets the home game and right outside their arena. They beat Minnesota State the one year, they beat Cornell, and right now at least they've got that to where they're the 2-3 game to where we don't have to deal with that. And like you said, a lot could change because they just changed up that way. It's really easy for them to go back, but it's also, Maine dropping to 6 also helps that whole scenario. But UMass is hot right now. I mean, I don't think you can ask anything more from them. They're peaking at the right time. Greg Carball's always has them planned in a good spot down the stretch. And right there, you've got 4 of the top 10 teams in Hockey East, followed by Providence after that. New Hampshire is obviously, as we discussed last week, falling out of the cut line, but really solves a problem, that's for sure, on your bracketology this week.
Just hearing you talk about UMass, haven't we talked in the past about how Greg Carville builds teams that are built for the playoffs? Is that still the case with this UMass team?
I think so. They play excellent defense. They're opportunistic. They find ways to score goals. They've got some elite back end players that can score. So yeah, and good goaltending, and very good goaltending. When you think about the runs they made to both the national championship game in 2019, and then to win the national championship in 2021, goaltending was a very big part of what they were able to do. So I do think that you're looking at another prototypical team that could go a long way in the tournament.
Let's turn to the ECAC. Quinnipiac lost on the road. This time it was St. Lawrence and the North Country Swing in the ECAC. The Bobcats are 3-3 in their last 6 games in conference. They've slid down to 9th in the current PairWise. They were a top 4 team at one point not too long ago. And just for reference, Cornell is at number 13 in the PairWise. So those teams, not a lot of daylight between them right now. What about the Bobcats? Is this just a bump in the road that you have at the right time? Is anything to be concerned about there?
I think we asked that question last week and we said there was no concern, but it does feel like there's a lot of just games that slip away. They got plenty of shots on goal in this game. Yeah, maybe they might have run into a hot goaltender. But you got to find ways to win those games, and you're going to run into a lot of hot goaltenders in the NCAA tournament. So we'll see what this does for Quinnipiac. Does it, make them a little bit more battle tested and put them into a scenario where they can win the ECAC and NCAA tournaments? Maybe. But you'd rather move up in the pairwise just to get into a position where you're a 1 or a 2 seed, so that you're going to be the home team in that first game, get the last change, and just feel like you're on more solid ground going into that tournament. That said, I still like the makeup of this team. So if they were to get into the NCAA tournament as a 3 seed, I wouldn't be surprised to see them return to yet another Frozen Four.
Yeah, we both said right off the bat a resounding no. We shouldn't be worried about that. And now maybe a little doubt in my resounding no, because of 3-3. They do have a game they don't have. Cornell has a game in hand on them, but they do have an 8-point lead. The worst thing about games in hand is, you have to win them. And so we can't throw that in the mix, but 3-3 in their last 6, dropping a little bit in the pairwise, maybe a time for some concern. We keep saying that maybe it wakes them up, but sooner or later it has to wake them up, because you don't want to be playing your worst hockey at this time of the year. But we have seen numerous teams that once they get to the NCAA tournament or their conference tournament, they hit a reset button and start anew and start afresh. So we'll see where this goes, but this is a really interesting time for them. Like I said, they've got this 8-point lead. They've got games. Cornell's got a game in hand. Let's say Cornell wins that. It's a 5-point lead. It's pretty safe, but I would be a little bit worried.
You want a little fun with this, and it'll probably still be that way when you do bracketology this week, Jim. As the top 3rd seed, Quinnipiac would play the lowest 2nd seed. So the first round matchup would be Minnesota versus Quinnipiac.
Oh, that's not bad. That would be a fun one. I wonder where that. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where that would end up. Possibly Providence when you really think about it, because you'd also want to try to align them with the number 1 overall seed, which would be Boston College. So, but a lot's going to shake out between now and Tuesday before I write the column, because you do have the Beanpot consolation game tonight featuring BC. But a lot of stuff, to think about for that's a pretty fun one to see, possibly a Quinnipiac Minnesota game back to back in the NCAA tournament.
Lastly, in this segment, Stonehill, they got their first win as a D1 program after dropping a game 10-1 on Friday to Lindenwood 1 on Saturday, 4-2.
Yeah, I'm excited for Stonehill. I'm happy for them. They were here when we played them, and I saw their assistant coach at the North American League Top Prospects, and by watching their scores, they were getting close. I said, "You're getting close," and next thing you know, they lose 10-1. But that shows you you respond quickly, and to turn that around. How many times in college hockey we beat them 8-1 the first night, and they gave us all we can handle the next night. And I told our guys, I said, they're going to come out and they're going to have some pride, and you got to have that bounce back, and we were able to bounce back. Happy for them that they got their first win. Rick Zombo wasn't happy with his quote. You read his quote: "Anyone can win in college hockey, and tonight was a loss that will be visible for a long time." And Rick wasn't happy with that, but he did say it. Anybody can beat anybody on a given day.
Yeah, and listen, there's some things that you have to think about with this program, and this was put together really quickly. This team, and I know it's people say, "Oh, well, the same thing was what happened with Arizona State." You know how many wins? Does anybody remember how many wins Arizona State had right off the bat their first year? They only had 5. Everybody's remembering this Arizona State team that 4 years in an NCAA tournament, but they started out with just 5 wins their first year. I look at Penn State. Their first year that they played a full schedule, they only had 8 wins. And they had a lot more money behind them. They had a lot more build-up time behind them. They had already hired a coach years in advance. Stonehill accelerated the path of how quickly they decided they were going to go and play a full Division I schedule. They could have scheduled only D3 and D2 teams this year, but they decided to go out, play the full D1 slate, and credit to them that they're taking their knocks. But as you said, I think it was just a week ago, Dan Rubin, our good friend, we've been texting back and forth because we've been saying it was going to happen soon. I think it was a week or two ago on Saturday. I said, here it is. This is going to be the day. Well, I was off by a couple of Saturdays, but they did have a really good bounce back. And losing 10-1 on that first night, coming back, winning 4-2, there had to be a lot of pride for this Skyhawks team.
Well, we're going to take a pause. When we come back, a little bit of PairWise talk and a little bit of a preview of the Beanpot final and consolation coming up this evening. You're listening to USCHO Weekend Review, sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back with USCHO Weekend Review. After the weekend, there are now only 2 Hockey East teams in the top 4. Maine slipped out to number 6. BC, North Dakota, BU, and Wisconsin are the top 4 as we record this on Monday. So first of all, we did talk about how in the first segment, how that's cleaned up the situation in putting teams from Hockey East and regionals. But there's some teams not too far out of that. Michigan State creeping up. They're 5th, 14 10,000ths behind Wisconsin in the RPI. And Michigan State and Wisconsin play the final weekend in the Big Ten. What about that? What about Michigan State? Can we pencil them in as somebody who's going to sneak into the top 4?
Yeah, the way I look at this right now, we're probably in a position where we're going to have BC and North Dakota definitely in the top 4, BU likely, and then I feel like that 5th team will become either Wisconsin or Michigan State. And they'll somewhat decide it when they play head to head that final weekend of the Big Ten regular season, and then they could meet again in the Big Ten tournament. So those types of scenarios, kind of make it so it feels like one of those 2 teams will be there. If you have only 2 teams from one league in that, it will make the seeding a little bit easier. You send BC to likely Providence, closest to their campus. You send North Dakota to Sioux Falls. They're not the host there. Omaha is, but you still send North Dakota there. BU, you can send to Springfield, and then Wisconsin, Michigan State, they get the St. Louis Regional. So that's so much cleaner than last week when you're you're forcing an interconference matchup in Springfield, and you're sending Maine out to, I think Maine was going to St. Louis. Despite the fact that North Dakota is not a host in Sioux Falls, you'd be idiotic to not put them in Sioux Falls, no matter where they finish. You've got to find a way to put them there, especially if they're a number one seed. It doesn't make sense. So that was the conundrum I had last week when I was trying to figure out what you do in Springfield. You can't put North Dakota in Springfield and put Boston University in Sioux Falls unless you want two empty buildings. That was a big issue for me. So I think you'd rather have two teams from the same conference play in the opening round rather than have empty buildings all across the country. We've talked. There's too much talk about attendance right now at regionals for the NCAA committee to want to do that. That's all just my opinion. Derek, I see you already going nuts. You might not agree with me, but I just can't see empty buildings being the preferred method.
No, you just took everything that I was going to say.
Okay.
Your whole thing. I was just going to say, agreed, and I'm going to throw this point in. You can't have empty buildings because there's too much talk about going to on-campus sites right now, and the committee doesn't want that. So they would just be feeding into it if they put North Dakota and out east and somebody else out in Sioux Falls. So yeah, there's zero chance that if North Dakota is going to be in Sioux Falls, in my opinion, without a doubt. So yeah, that's why I threw my hands up, because you just took what I wanted to say. But I will answer the question that Ed asked. Is Michigan State creeping towards the number one seed? I think they will be.
I'm not surprised about that. I'd have to agree with you. They and Wisconsin have been the pleasant surprises along with Maine this season, I think. I don't know if you throw anybody else in there.
Inside the Big Ten, they've probably been the two most consistent teams. Minnesota being close, but there's nobody in the Big Ten that has had the consistency that Wisconsin and Michigan State have had.
Well, let's talk about some other teams that are around the cut line of the pairwise. St. Cloud now inside the bubble after sweeping Miami on the weekend. Michigan, after getting swept by the Spartans, is below the cut line. Is Michigan missing the tournament something we would have expected before this season started? Honestly, no, but you had to feel like it was a little more tenuous than last year.
We said no. I'm shaking my head. No, nobody would have thought that Michigan would be where they are right now. But that being said, a couple weeks ago, we talked about them being in danger. This has been something that's been trending towards. So right now, as of today, we're shaking our head. We wouldn't have been surprised. We're very surprised at the beginning of the year that this is happening. But it's been trending this direction for a couple weeks now.
That's the big part of it is, if you had asked me to kind of pick the Frozen Four at the beginning of the year, I'd probably have thought about putting Michigan back there. But they lost enough, and you're seeing those losses kind of stack up in terms of results, and they're in a very tough Big Ten this year. I don't think we've had it where Michigan has had four, maybe even if you throw Notre Dame in there, five really competitive teams to play. And when you're looking at, in addition to Michigan State, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and at times Notre Dame, that's a pretty good juggernaut. When you only have 7 teams in the league, 4 of your 6 opponents, every night you might not be the favorites in any of those games, and you're Michigan. You're not used to that, so it's a bit of a new territory for this Michigan team. And now it's the challenge: can they get back in? They're below the cut line right now. What are they going to have to do to work themselves back in? It might take help. It might take teams like St. Cloud or somebody else that's right around the bubble slipping up, not playing well down the stretch.
That being said, if they do get in, watch out.
Watch out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want to be a number one seed that got them right off the bat, because they're certainly not going to play another Big Ten team. So Watch out. If they get in, you may see a 4 seed that makes a little bit of noise. And I thought, then nobody would be surprised.
So like a BC or a North Dakota taking on Michigan in the first round.
Yeah, North Dakota and Sioux Falls against Michigan.
Oh boy.
That one probably doesn't feel that good for the Fighting Hawks fans.
You know who the winners are, though? The fans. The winners are all out there, the fans, because that's an unbelievable match.
Everybody inside the bubble is really good this year.
I think you're right. There's not a single team, and even the 2 teams that are going to come from outside the bubble, whether it's an RIT or a Holy Cross or a Sacred Heart from Atlantic Hockey, somebody like that, or is it going to be Minnesota State? Yes, they've been decimated by the transfer portal. Michigan Tech. Man, I kind of wish St. Thomas could get in the tournament. Bemidji's pretty darn good.
Bemidji
scary,
can be close.
Scary.
Like Bemidji could win the league. I mean, that's how close it is right now.
Yeah, and so that's you put the 14 teams that we're going to know about. Those 2 teams that we're not even talking about will be just as scary as Michigan, because you at that point, if you're the number 1 seed, you don't want to lose that game. That's all you're focused on. Don't lose this game. So that becomes a little bit more of a stressor.
Yeah, and Tommy Serratori has shown a track record in single elimination games, thinking back to the Cole Caulfield, Wisconsin Badgers losing in the first round.
Right.
And you got, Bemidji's just 3 points back, and they've got a game in hand. I mean, that league is really tight up top. I mean, you've got Minnesota State with 35 points, St. Thomas at 34, and Bemidji State with 32. But they each have 2 games in hand. Their winning percentages are better than Minnesota State's right now. So it's
right.
There's a lot to be played in the CCHA to be saying Minnesota State's the team.
Well, let's turn to Arizona State. Now, sometimes you wonder if there's a grassroots effort or if it's AstroTurf. It's a term they use in politics. Is there a buzz or not? But there is some discussion on X about Arizona State being a 20-win team, but not having a chance to get in the NCAA field. College Hockey West said in a tweet that the PairWise needs to be tweaked because they believe Arizona State should be higher. I'm going to answer the question first. Does it need to be tweaked? No. You need some system that accounts for strength of schedule. And Arizona State has had a lot of home games. And right now, by the RPI, the 30th schedule compared to teams that have had 20 wins that are in single-digit strengths of schedule. So whether you need to tweak it, whether you need to replace it, you still need to have something that takes strength of schedule into consideration. And I do like favoring road games versus home games for wins to try to encourage that. So I don't know what you come up with that would get them in that takes strength of schedule into consideration.
Other than going back to what we had to do during COVID, and that's just pick the teams. But I think that I'm on College Hockey West all the time. Scott and Paul there are great for the game. They're great for hockey in that region. They've kind of adopted us, even though we're east of the Mississippi, but they cover Lindenwood, they cover Air Force, they cover Denver, Colorado College, Arizona. They do a great job, and they do a great job with club hockey. And I will continue to be a guest on their show, but they asked me basically the same question. And I told them the same thing. I mean, Arizona State can get to 26 wins, but they had too many ties. And they were at home. They didn't beat everybody they needed to beat. And I was texting with Greg Powers yesterday. I said, still an avenue for you to get in the tournament. He said, a small one, but we need to win all of our games and get some help. But no, everybody, they won't have to deal with this in the future again. They're going into the NCHC. They won't have to deal with it. It's the same thing as Fairbanks last year. No, this. Everybody knew that this is how they determine the field. You can't change it because of just one team, or we'd be changing it every year because every year there's that one team. 26 wins or not, they didn't win enough in regulation.
And didn't go on the road enough too. And I know that as an independent team, and you said it right, Derek, you're not going to be in this situation really in the future unless you're scheduling almost all of your non-conference games at home. But unfortunately, the way that the schedule worked out, they had a lot of back ends of series that were owed. You had to have opponents wanted to come there to pay back for some road games that Arizona State gave them. But what they ended up with this season was just such a disproportionate schedule, and that's kind of unfortunate. And at the same time, as you said, they didn't have the results. 5 of their wins are in overtime. So really, if you're thinking about wins, they are only, in terms of full value wins, they only have 15 of them. Ties, those are even worse. When those ties are at home, you're talking about, only half the value, and then you only get 4/5 of the value of that. So that's almost like, almost it's closer to a loss than it is a win. So I think that's where their biggest issues came from. And does the PairWise need to be tweaked? Yeah, maybe, but not for this reason. There's things that I still wish would be included back in the PairWise. I always liked the record against teams under consideration. I know that people didn't like the cliff that it created at times, but it made sense. Even the last 16, last 20, I know that there's some unevenness of schedules, but that always made sense because then you get the hottest teams in the tournament. So I like the old criteria a lot better. I like the current way that the RPI is weighted to really emphasize strength of schedule over your own winning percentage. And that's probably what's happening most to Arizona State is that the fact that their strength of schedule is nowhere near as strong as those other 5 teams that are 20-win clubs. That's another part of it, that their schedule wasn't strong enough. So I think that we could still tweak the PairWise? Absolutely. But is it to get Arizona State in the tournament? No.
I don't even think if you tweak it with what you were saying, they get in the tournament.
Probably not, unless you really reconfigure the RPI to weight it higher on your own schedule as opposed to your opponent's schedule. That's the only way that you really find a way to tweak it that could have helped them a little bit.
And why did they make some changes to it last time? To get teams to go on the road.
Yeah. And I could make the same argument against RIT that we make against Arizona State. RIT could get to 25, 26 wins and not win their conference tournament, and they will not get in the NCAA tournament. There's still like a fraction of a % chance if everything fell the right way, but they don't have a schedule like the teams that have that number of wins have had.
That goes back to what we started back in October. How well does your conference play out of conference? And, forget about being an independent. When you're in a conference and your team and your conference doesn't have a strong non-conference winning percentage, that's going to bring you down as well.
One last thing tonight is the Beanpot final and the consolation game a little bit earlier in the evening. BC and Harvard is the consolation game. A lot on the line for Harvard for pride, a lot on the line for BC and PairWise.
A lot on the line for the Eagles. This is one of those games that I was looking at the money line this morning. They're maybe like minus 455 or something like that in terms of a favorite, massive favorite in this game. But the consolation game is a strange game. You're playing in a near 18,000 seat building, usually with about 500 fans there. Most of the BC fans, which turned out in droves last week, have sold their tickets off to Northeastern and BU fans. And I would not expect a big turnout. So again, we talked about it last week, generating your own atmosphere in terms of, getting your team up for this game. It's this one compared to the 5 o'clock semifinal last week, where there's so much on the line, you still have some hopes of winning a championship. This one's hard to, and I've seen too many good teams fall apart in this consolation game, and it really hurts them in the NCAA tournament. If I can't really do the future math that well, But if BC loses this game tonight, you have to believe that they would probably fall out of the number one overall PairWise spot, a position they've held now for a number of weeks. So you don't think of a consolation game in a tournament that I think somehow it will be on television tonight. I think I saw somebody is going to show it. Maybe I think it's ESPN Plus will have the game. It won't be on Nesson, but ESPN Plus will have it. But not a lot of people are going to have eyeballs in this game. It means a ton to the Eagles.
I'm just going to recycle what I said last week. You get up to play in NHL buildings. You get up in the Beanpot. Boston College knows what they're playing for. Once again, you have to have a pulse here. You're playing in the home of the Boston Bruins. A lot of those guys will never, if they're graduating, how many of them will get a chance to play in an NHL building again in a tournament with the prestige of the Beanpot? So I'm just going to recycle I don't understand not getting up for this game. So whether there's 5 people in the stands, 5,000, 20,000, same thing. And Harvard is going to play for a lot of pride.
A lot. This has been a tough season for Ted Donato and his club. They'll have as much motivation as Boston College.
So just recycle what I said last week.
All right. And that certainly will apply, although it should be a packed barn tonight for the championship with Boston University and Northeastern. The Huskies now 12-12-2 on the season and starting to show some real life.
They are. And listen, they're not going to make a pairwise run. Right now I have them as about a 4% chance to make the NCAA tournament. Most of that is probably off the thought that they could win Hockey East if they go on a nice run here. But listen, they've done so much right since they got healthy. This is a dangerous team. Worse off for BU is that they've started to get some confidence in this tournament. They won 4 tournaments, 4 Beanpots in the 1980s, all in the 1980s. And then until 7 years ago, they had not won one since. Now they've won 4 of the last 5, I think it is. This would be 5 of 6 if they win tonight. Of course, we didn't have a Beanpot in 2021. But as strong as BU is, I don't see any reason why Northeastern is not going to give them a heck of a game. And if overtime and a shootout were involved again, don't think that it would surprise me an ounce.
I'm going to pick Northeastern. We didn't talk about predictions last week, so I'm going to say Northeastern wins this one. And I'm going to.
Does it take overtime? Does it take a shootout?
I'm going to just be controversial right now and say it goes to a shootout so everybody can bitch online about it, about how the Beanpot
we had it last year.
How the Beanpot shouldn't end. So we might as well just keep it going.
Yeah, might as well. Yeah, so I think I saw that was available today. You could pick a regulation tie on DraftKings, and it was, I think, plus 400, 4-1 odds to get a regulation tie. I actually like that pick there, Derek.
Well, you know what? I saw somebody on Twitter last night, or X says, I guess in the Super Bowl, it would end up, if that was a pairwise game, it would end up in a tie.
And somebody said the Chiefs should have only gotten 0.55% of a Super Bowl.
But it was a neutral site. It was a neutral site.
It was a neutral site game.
Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up. Enjoy the Beanpot in person tonight, Jim. This podcast has been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to reserve your seats. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.